Good afternoon or good evening, depending where you might be. My name is Kevin Michael Grace, and this is the KMG show for Tuesday, January 6th, 2021. First up, Claudia Conway, America's Daughter. Alternate title, Mothers Don't Let Their Daughters Grow Up to Have TikTok Accounts. Alternate title, Life, Liberty, and the Pursuit of Thirstiness. Let's see, what's the latest from the Daily Mail? Police in New Jersey have launched an investigation into a topless photo of Kellyanne Conway's 16-year-old daughter that was posted to the former Trump's aide's Twitter on Monday. Claudia had accused her mother of leaking the image on Twitter's newly launched Fleets feature, which deletes posts after 24 hours Monday night. The teen later walked back her comments, insisting in videos on TikTok that Kellyanne would never intentionally do that, and said her account was probably hacked. 4 officers with the Bergen County Prosecutor's Office and Alpine Police Department were seen arriving at the Conway family's mansion in Alpine, New Jersey, just before noon on Tuesday. They were inside the home for about an hour before leaving at 1:10 p.m. In a statement to the Daily Mail, Alpine Police Chief Christopher Belcall confirmed that a probe into the apparent leak is underway. An investigation is being conducted. No additional information can be released. Twitter told Variety it is also investigating the matter. The social media giant says it's currently unsure how long the post was visible, how many people saw it, and who deleted it. In videos posted to her official TikTok page Monday, Claudia confirmed the topless image was authentic and claimed that Kellyanne had been keeping it to use against her someday. The teen warned her mother she was going to effing jail for uploading the image. Anytime she's taken it, she takes it all the time, Claudia, who turned 16 in October, said. She took a picture of that, so that was on her phone, and I guess she accidentally posted it or somebody hacked her, but nobody would ever have any photo like that ever. I'm shaking. I don't know what to do, the visibly upset teen continued. Nobody would ever have that phone, ever. It was on my phone. I don't think I've ever sent it to anyone. So I'm assuming that my mom took a picture of it to use against me one day, and then somebody hacked her or something, because there's no physical possible way that anybody would have that photo of me. And Claudia Conway has very cleverly, just as a 16-year-old, suggested pretty strongly who exactly put that photo on her mother's Twitter account. However, Claudia later reversed course Tuesday and apologized for publicly accusing her mother. She said that she had acted irrationally and insisted her mother would never intentionally post anything on social media to harm her. Yes, I have faith, and I know my mother would never put anything like that on the internet. Same with me, Claudia said in one clip. My daughter and I, we fight like mothers and daughters, but we also love like mothers and daughters, and I do love her. In a separate video posted today, Claudia continued, yesterday when I was made aware of the situation, I was distraught and reacted very irrationally and impulsively, and that's something that I do regret. Claudia also pleaded with her 1.6 million followers to stop contacting authorities and stop inciting violence and hate against her family. Please stop calling authorities because it only hurts us more than it helps us. Helps us? Helps Claudia, perhaps, who is well on her way to being an acclaimed influencer. Making threats and whatnot is really putting my safety at risk and putting me in danger. Yes, and of course, Claudia Conway never stopped to think for a moment that releasing the most detailed information about her personal life and that of her family's personal life might put people in danger. Claudia added that she and Kellyanne are both taking time away from social media to work on their relationship offline. I will be taking a break because social media is a really dark place, so instead of shedding light on this situation, hate and violence was incited, and that was never ever my intention, nor my mom's. The teen also sought to preemptively stamp out speculation she had been forced by her parents to apologize. Yes, I believe that people must be, at least 14 years old to indulge in this kind of thing. In the United States, perhaps it's 13. In any event, it seems to me it should be 18. As I've said previously, social media was invented to make women crazy or crazier. Because in the world before social media, in the world before the internet, women were in competition with women. But which women would these be? Well, women in their families, among their friends, people they go to school with, people that they work with, people in their social milieu. Now women are in competition with every other woman in the world. Kellyanne Conway is the daughter of two famous, or one famous and one semi-famous person. Her mother was a spokesman for President Donald Trump, and her father, George Conway, apparently a disgruntled office seeker, decided to vault to the top of the list of never Trumpers. Now, this obviously presented a problem, that one can't have one's husband screeching against one's boss. Everyone in the media thought this was absolutely hilarious, of course, because it was Donald Trump, Orange Bad Man, the worst man alive. If Kellyanne's mother was, let's say, a senior executive with Coca-Cola, and her husband was tweeting on social media that Coca-Cola was poison, I don't think that the media would consider this sort of behavior acceptable. As I said before, it seemed to me that short of an agreement for George Conway to shut up, well, one of them should have resigned. Either George or his wife should have left their positions. Claudia Conway. I'm looking at pictures of her from the London Sun, and this is a 16-year-old girl who already looks completely monstrous, also insane. And 1.6 million followers for a 16-year-old girl who is of no account whatsoever. None. And I rather imagined that in the years to come, very soon, Claudia Conway is going to have her own OnlyFans account, that she is going to announce that she is bi, lesbian, non-binary, trans, perhaps. 2020 was the year of thirstiness, but 2021, no change in sight, none whatsoever. And I blame the media for this, because in order to hurt Donald Trump and his administration, the media decided that it would be very amusing to make a, shall we say, unstable teenage girl even more unstable, to drive her over the edge into outright craziness by giving her all of the oxygen and more that she could ever desire. If anyone in the media had a conscience, I think that they would be having second thoughts about what they did. But once again, since this has to do with Donald Trump, no, they are not going to have second thoughts. And I believe that they're probably feeling pretty amused about the whole business. Let's have a look at the chat. Claudia Conway's story won't end well, says Palcazo 88. No, she is going to be remembered for this for the rest of her life. Roulette Crack says Kellyanne Conway uses a new Twitter app called Fleet that only kids know about. That may well be true. I am on Twitter an awful lot, and I've never heard of it. Perhaps they sent me some sort of notification of this thrilling new app. But again, no. Duryoman says, I see Elliot Page is getting a divorce. What an unpredictable happening. Evie Saidi was a doctor of psychology. KMG needs dual bed accommodations for the amount of lovemaking he does. Ha, 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 ha. No, just me. Just me. I've had my innings. Roulette cracked, influencing what exactly? Union with the dark side. We are not all doomed, but a lot are. Yes, I don't know. Increasingly, when I read the Daily Mail, and I go through the Daily Mail, because it has more news on it than any site, regardless of what one believes counts as news nowadays. And I just scroll down through the stories, and I begin to think that I should join a monastery, one of those ones with a vow of silence. Roulette Crack says in the UK, a boy was blackmailing a girl about showing her nude pics, and she got some of her demented followers to kill him. This stuff is out of hand with these girls. I don't know. Do they talk about this? I know that in schools nowadays, they spend an enormous amount of time talking about sex and all its possible permutations. Perhaps they're not spending enough time telling young women not to take nude photos of themselves, because the only point of nude photos would be to send them to boys or perhaps girls. Women spend a lot of time looking in the mirror so they know what their bodies look like. I'm not going to say it takes two to tango, but there have been so many of these sad stories of young women taking nude photos of themselves and sending them to a boyfriend or would-be boyfriend, and then professing shock when these pictures ended up in the possession of everyone else in the school. What did they think was going to happen to these pictures? Glib Medley says, have kids always been ready to sell out their parents, or is it a byproduct of social media? I think it's a byproduct of social media, but it's also has to do with the neo-Stalinism that we live under now. You remember the story of Pavel or Pavlik Morozov, which may have been completely made up, but in any event, I believe in the 1930s, little Pavlik became a national hero in the Soviet Union because he had his parents arrested. And the story goes that they killed him. But once again, if you spend some time looking into this, it appears that the story was largely or completely made up. But never mind, the message was sent to the parents of the Soviet Union: you are not safe anywhere. You're not even safe among your own children. We get another report from beyond Central Florida. Went to tire shop in my hometown. Employees no masks, but the 3 people in waiting room all wore masks. I said, "Hey, you don't need to wear masks. This is such and such a county. There's no mask mandate." Afghanistan says Daily Mail makes porn seem respectable. I don't know. The Daily Mail has been talking about these pictures of Claudia Conway that she was posting, or videos that she was posting when she was 15 years old, and she's dancing around wearing a skimpy outfit. Now, apparently there's a new picture of Claudia Conway on Twitter. It was on Twitter, and as we know, the internet never forgets. So as a result, we're going to have a great number of people looking to find this nude photo of a 16-year-old girl, and doubtless it has been found, and doubtless it is posted on all manner of sites. Dangerous, though, against the law. Hauper says there's a chapter in Darkness at Noon by Arthur Kessler about an old white living with a daughter he expects to eventually turn him in. Glib Medley, the Daily Express, had a nice feature of Elizabeth Hurley. Oh, yes. Liz Hurley, who has a very close and rather creepy relationship with one of her nephews. And there was a topless picture of Elizabeth Hurley posted on Instagram And Piers Morgan, or Moron, depending on what your taste is, suggested that it was her son who took the picture. Liz Hurley is now saying that it was her 80-year-old mother who took the picture. I've seen the picture. She is wearing a fur coat, which appears to have been glued to her décolletage at strategic places. And what comment can one make about this picture? Nice rack. That was the whole point of taking the picture and posting the picture. That has been my reaction to Liz Hurley ever since I first heard of her, when she wore the famous ripped and safety pinned Versace dress. Great body. I've never seen much indication that she can act, however. Let's see. New York Post is Shakespeare next to the Daily Mail. Well, the Daily Mail is, they decided that they were going to, corner the gossip market. And this they have pretty much done. The Daily Mail posts so much, you've heard me complain about this, that editorial standards have been completely destroyed there. But I guess that's the price that you pay for volume. It's an amusing story here from the Portland Oregonian today, updated today. Portland Mayor Ted Wheeler pepper sprays unmasked man who confronted him with video camera. Is that a legal weapon in the state of Oregon, in the city of Portland? Very amusing to me. Apparently he walks around with pepper spray. That might be seen to be an aggressive act, possibly illegal one. Portland Mayor Ted Wheeler blasted with pepper spray an unmasked man who confronted him and former Mayor Sam Adams with a video camera as the two left a pub Sunday night. The two men told police. Wheeler and Adams had just finished dinner at the McEnemin's Hillsdale Brewery and Public House on Southwest Sunset Boulevard around 8 p.m. when a man, both described as middle-aged, accused the current mayor of dining without a mask, according to the Portland Police Bureau. Wheeler said he told the person who accosted him and Adams that the pair had eaten in a tented area of the pub, which does not require face coverings under current coronavirus restrictions, the report said. The man then followed Wheeler closely as he walked to his car, the mayor told police. He had no face mask on, and he got within a foot or two of my face. While he was videoing me, I immediately became concerned for my personal safety. I clearly informed him that he needed to back off. He did not do so. So I informed him that I was carrying pepper spray and that I would use it if he did not back off. He maintained at close distance. I pulled out my pepper spray and I sprayed him in the eyes. Afterward, Wheeler said he provided the man with a bottle of water to rinse his face. Wheeler told police he did not recognize the man who he and Adams both described as in his 40s and wearing dark clothing and glasses. Wheeler and Adams have been in talks about the former mayor returning to City Hall to serve under the current administration. I thought it might have something to do with the fact that Ted Wheeler recently divorced. Perhaps we'll hear more about that later, because it seems to be pretty much the rule now in both Seattle and Portland that the mayors of these cities must be homosexual. Earlier this month, a group of left-wing activists raucously accosted Wheeler while he was dining in Northwest Portland. A member of the group started swatting at Wheeler and made physical contact with him, his office said at the time. Demonstrators demanding Wheeler's resignation during the height of Portland's 2020 racial justice protests smashed windows and set fires inside his condo building, prompting the mayor to move. No mention in this story of the ongoing insurrection in and around the federal building in Portland. I guess that has just become so mundane that there is no reason to mention it. Such is Portland. Now, Twitter permanently bans MyPillow CEO. This is from the Associated Press. Twitter's permanently banned MyPillow CEO Mike Lindell's account after he continued to perpetuate the baseless claim that Donald Trump won the 2020 presidential election. Twitter decided to ban Lindell, who founded betting company MyPillow, due to repeated violations of its civic integrity policy, a spokesperson said. The policy was implemented last September and is targeted at fighting disinformation. It is not immediately clear which post by Lindell on Twitter triggered the suspension of his account. Of course, you all know that YouTube laid down the law, a couple of months ago, that there is to be no disputing of the election. And we know two things now. One, that Donald Trump stole the 2016 election because he was a puppet of Vladimir Putin. But 4 years later, it was impossible to steal a presidential election. So Twitter is taking the position that anything they deem to be misinformation will lead to the permanent suspension of people with accounts. It occurs to me, that the 2003 invasion of Iraq was based on a conspiracy to dupe the world into believing that, one, Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction, which he intended to use, perhaps imminently, and two, that Saddam Hussein was key to the 2001 bombings in New York City and Washington. Call me cynical if you like, I don't mind. I think what would happen now is that after the invasion, reporters would be taken to a hole in the ground, or perhaps pictures would have been presented to the media saying, we dug up these holes and look at these tubes. Hey, presto, weapons of mass destruction. In fact, I have no doubt of that now. If Twitter's position is that everyone who disagrees with them on so-called matters of fact is unwelcome, well, then roughly about half the population of America is unwelcome at Twitter. I don't know how long I will be welcome at Twitter. It's not fun anymore, and I'm constantly having to check myself, constantly having to engage in what gross irony and the like. But I do use my Twitter account to advertise this show. Again, from the Daily Mail. Oh, yes. Remember when we were told, one gets, it's also tiresome, as that Chinese man in the meme says. Mitch McConnell wanted Trump impeached. Remember that? And there was going to be a secret ballot. Well, we heard that, yesterday? Here from the Daily Mail, 45 Republican senators, including Mitch McConnell, vote that Donald Trump's impeachment trial is unconstitutional because he is no longer in office. In sign, they will vote to acquit. Senator Rand Paul said the vote meant the impeachment trial is dead on arrival. Not necessarily. They're going to push this as far as they can. The trial is expected to begin February the 9th, which is 20 days after Trump left office. But I guess they're looking for a majority of senators to vote for Trump's impeachment. And then they could say that, well, Trump was actually impeached out of office, except for, some Picayune rules. I think that's the line that they are going to take. In any event, wasn't this supposed to be a time for healing? Wasn't it? That's what I heard. In fact, I heard it repeatedly. We all had it shoved down our throats. Kayleigh McEnany has job offer with Fox News put on hold after Capitol riot. Wait a minute. I thought it was an insurrection or a coup. But Trump economic aide Larry Kudlow gets show on Fox Business. Questions arose about McEnany's future employment after her disclosure report, obtained by the watchdog group Crew, showed that she had an offer from Fox News in January. She filed the report ahead of her departure from Trump's White House. She left the administration January 19th, the day before President Biden took the oath of office. But a Fox spokesperson told the Daily Mail that Kayleigh McEnany is not currently an employee or contributor at Fox News. Oh, yes, okay. Initial conversations, this is according to someone at Fox, were had post-election and we paused on them. We do not discuss the details behind contracts with any personnel, but we are open to hiring her in the future given we do not condone cancel culture. After the election, McEnany made 20 appearances on Fox News, according to a tally by the Washington Post, which is the sort of thing that newspapers, including a newspaper of record, do now. Oh my God, did you see that this woman, McEnany, made 20 appearances on Fox News after the election? However, Kudlow, who is Trump's chief economic aide, regularly developed upbeat assessments of the economy and the prospects of beating the COVID-19 pandemic, will be getting a weekday show on Fox Business Network. Infamously, in February 2020, he said of the pandemic, "We have contained this. I won't say airtight, but it's pretty close to airtight." Many staffers from the Trump administration are having trouble finding jobs in their post-White House lives, particularly after President Trump was heavily criticized for his initial lackluster response to the riot. Several Trump aides described to Politico a bleak job market with virtually no chance of landing jobs in corporate America. Some even had their leads disappear after the riot at the Capitol on January the 6th. Strangely enough, all of these business people and politicos who expressed acclaim for the uprising, which is, I believe, the word that Nancy Pelosi or Kamala Harris used, that is to say, the BLM uprising, they're not having any trouble getting jobs. It always comes down to whom, always. There's no exceptions. Fired New York Times editor accuses the paper of taking a shot at my reputation by suggesting she was fired for her work rather than pro-Biden. I have chills tweet. It came after she tweeted about having chills while watching Biden's plane arrive in D.C. ahead of the inauguration. You're leaving out the important part here, which is the rather stupendous error that she disseminated, which was, the pettiness of the Trump administration not sending a military plane to bring him to D.C. is, as is tradition, is mortifying, childish. That was not true. It was Joe Biden's decision not to take a military plane. Okay. Oh, George Floyd. Remember the good old days when America was in flames because of St. George Floyd? President Joe Biden signed a series of executive orders Tuesday afternoon that deal with racial equity. Equity, mind you, not equality. Many people confuse those words, and it is a confusion which is not to your benefit or not to the benefit of people like you. Biden took aim at one of Donald Trump's signature measures, the 1776 Project, as lies. He credited the death of George Floyd as an inflection point against turning America against systemic racism and white supremacy. You mean the kind of white supremacy that resulted in a washed out, corrupt 78-year-old white man becoming president of the United States despite finishing 5th in the New Hampshire primary? Biden said those 8 minutes and 46 seconds that took George Floyd's life opened the eyes of millions of Americans and millions of people all over the world. It was the knee on the neck of justice, and it wouldn't be forgotten. It stirred the consciousness of tens of millions of Americans, and in my view, it marked a turning point in this country's attitude toward racial justice. As a rule, I would suggest that it's not a good idea for people to attempt to cash a counterfeit $20 bill and then not escape when you have a chance to do so, and then to resist arrest several times, but perhaps more important, not to ingest a critical, life-threatening amount of fentanyl at any time. But no, we're all going to pretend what a fine fellow the former porn star, George Floyd, the man with a criminal record as long as your arm, the man who served 5 years in prison for sticking a pistol in the stomach of a pregnant woman and during a home invasion and demanding money and drugs. There were no money or drugs on the premises, whereupon they fled. The home invaders fled to their car, which stupidly was their own car. So the woman got the license plate number, called the police, and he was quickly apprehended. But I don't know, how long before the George Floyd appears on a stamp? Are there schools named after him? In more Biden regime color revolution news, Biden calls Vladimir Putin to press for release of poisoned opposition leader Navalny. President also warns he'll consider sanctions over solar wind cyber hack and bounties on U.S. troops. There's no evidence of any bounties on U.S. troops. But never mind that. Biden brought up the clampdown on peaceful protests and Navalny poisoning, of which there's no evidence, plus the invasion of the Ukraine. Russia is not giving the Ukraine back. Biden also raised Russian interference in the 2020 election. What? There was skullduggery in the 2020 election? I thought it was all legit. Oh, was the narrative changing already? Was it Russian interference that was responsible for Donald Trump getting 75 million votes? Perhaps that's what we'll be hearing in the near future. I would not be surprised in the slightest. How did Romney even get elected? Any Mormons in the chat? Asked Buddy. Well, he is a Mormon, and he is a famous Mormon, and he is a famous Republican. People know his name because his father, George Romney, was a famous Mormon who was governor of Michigan and ran for president and later held a cabinet office under Richard Nixon. Let's see. My trail of disgrace says might need a more powerful computer and second monitor. A green screen would help too to handle Rumble or Trovo streaming, but maybe he could crowdfund us for one. Roulette Crack says poking the bear and the dragon whilst simultaneously feminizing the military. Oh, Head McNeck warns me anyone who doesn't believe the story about bounties on U.S. troops is spreading conspiracy theories and misinformation. Emmett Kelly's Earth says statues of George Floyd will replace the ones of Columbus torn down over the summer, because Columbus, what did he ever accomplish? Contracoup says it was only a couple of years ago how the entire media was talking about the horrible, horrible Hollywood blacklist during the McCarthy era. Now they're in absolute glee over their own blacklists. Half Galician says Larry Kudlow is famous for being a Pollyanna. To me, Larry Kudlow is infamous for throwing his long-time, decades-long friend, Peter Brimlow, under the bus. Okay, Rumble and Trovo. Okay, I will look into this. Contracoup again, I think they should impeach Trump yearly, like a libtard guy, Fox Day. Professor Pohl, hello, they can't ban KMG. He fills in the diversity slot for reasonable Canadian. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not too... Kevin is not much a poutine appreciator, fake Canadian. I believe I mentioned on this live stream that the first person... I'd heard of poutine, of course, and I'd heard it described. The first person I ever saw poutine, eat poutine, was in, the middle 90s, Colby Kosh, Alberta Report magazine. And I was somewhat shocked because I actually believed that poutine was a troll perpetrated by Quebecois. That the Maudit Anglais will believe anything, even that we eat this slop. But it turns out that they do. And in recent years, I can tell you that poutine has become somewhat popular in English Canada. And how about that segue, folks? Because I'm going to talk about Canada, and my Canada is sliding into totalitarianism and absolute anarchy at a remarkable rate. Last week, Aaron O'Toole pressed for ousting Derek Sloan, an MP from his caucus, because Derek Sloan had accepted $131 from a neo-Nazi when he was running for Conservative leader. This contribution did not appear under the person's name. Paul Fromm is his name. The contribution came from Frederick P. Fromm. And I suppose it was the duty of his campaign to refuse all contributions until there had been a legal vetting of all the contributors, including a determination of their full legal names. Conservative leader Aaron O'Toole, this is from Alex Boutillier in the Toronto Star, says he opposes, quote, serious, unquote, penalties for simple possession of illegal drugs, but that his party will not support further legalization. This is exactly Justin Trudeau's position. Speaking to reporters in Ottawa Monday, O'Toole said that Canadians struggling with addiction deserve assistance from the government, not harsh sentences. This is the planted axiom in this story that Canadians who are arrested for simple possession of fentanyl, heroin, cocaine, or whatever, are given harsh sentences. There is no evidence of this whatsoever. Because speaking of these harsh sentences suggests that some guy who goes and buys $40 worth of cocaine or crack or whatever on the streets is facing and will get 5-10 years in prison. It doesn't happen. I would be shocked if more than 100 people in Canada last year were actually imprisoned for simple possession of any drugs. O'Toole said at a news conference it's not appropriate to have very serious penalties for Canadians who have problems with drugs. I don't believe in very serious penalties for something like that, but at the same time, we need to educate Canadians because there is a risk with substances, drugs, and it's the role of politicians to talk about the risks for Canadians' well-being. One might think that this story would include the numbers, the rather surprising numbers of fatal overdoses from illegal drugs in Canada last year. Let's see whether this story does that. O'Toole says his party will not support legalizing drugs while avoiding a direct question about decriminalization. Of course, he would avoid it. Legalization, yeah, we know what legalization means. O'Toole, and we know what decriminalization means. O'Toole says now is not the time to further legalize drugs. Now is not the time. Just like now was not the time to legalize a gay marriage. Now was not the time to legalize euthanasia. Now was not the time to legalize prostitution. You see, Aaron O'Toole's plan is to cleverly, I don't know, in 4 or 5, maybe 3 years from now, say, oh yes, a consensus is built in Canada for decriminalization of all drugs. A consensus that came about because no one is arguing the other side. That is how weak, pathetic, contemptible my country has become. The Conservative government of Stephen Harper brought in mandatory minimum sentencing for nonviolent drug crimes. The Supreme Court struck down the measure years later, suggesting the law cast too wide a net and could result in cruel and unusual punishment. Did Stephen Harper ever use the notwithstanding clause of the Constitution ever to overturn Supreme Court verdicts? No, he did not. He even pledged before he became Prime Minister that he would never, ever do this, and blasted the Liberal Party leader at the time, Paul Martin, because Paul Martin had actually said, I'm not making this up, this is true. Paul Martin had said that in a hypothetical situation where the Supreme Court of Canada ordered Catholic priests to perform gay marriages, he might consider using the notwithstanding clause to overturn that Supreme Court ruling. And Stephen Harper huffed and puffed and said, how outrageous. Behold, social conservative Stephen Harper. O'Toole's comments suggest the Conservative leader is softening the party's stance on drug crimes as Canada continues to struggle to address an ongoing opioid crisis. O'Toole said, we've seen horrible cases with opioids and other drugs. Maybe it's time for the government to put in place for the well-being of Canadians on the drugs and on mental health. It's not the time right now to legalize all drugs. Oh, okay, and no numbers. No numbers. From Alex Boutillier of the Toronto Star. And again, the suggestion that the solution, or at least a partial solution, for people who are suffering mental health problems and also dying problems from opioids is to make it easier for Canadians to get a hold of opioids. Now, here is bearing the lead with a vengeance. In August, the Director of Public Prosecutions issued direction to Crown attorneys that prosecution of drug offenses should, quote, generally be reserved for the most serious manifestations of the offense, unquote. Those manifestations include when possession of drugs put children at risk, impaired driving, threats to the community, and trafficking. In other words, the possession of all drugs in Canada has been effectively decriminalized. Liberal MP Nathaniel Erskine Smith welcomed O'Toole's comments as well. He might. The Beaches East York MP has a private member's bill before Parliament that would decriminalize simple possession. It is expected to come before the House of Commons in March. So, possession of heroin, use of fentanyl, use of other dangerous opiates and other drugs, not a big problem. It's essentially, it's a problem of treatment, except we're not going to treat these people. However, people breaking curfew because of COVID-19, people leaving their homes when they're not supposed to, people going to parks to exercise or to look at the cherry blossoms, that is a very serious matter indeed. And we need to have enough TAC teams to take care of those dangerous offenders. Tumblr the country. This is what Canada has become. Oh, and in further totalitarian news, this is from CTV News. On the proposal of NDP leader Jagmeet Singh, members of Parliament unanimously agreed Monday to call on the federal government to declare the Proud Boys a terrorist entity. The motion called on the government to use all available tools to address the proliferation of white supremacists and hate groups, starting with the immediate designation of the Proud Boys as a terrorist group. The Proud Boys are a far-right extremist group founded by a Canadian, and members of the group were present at the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol. Well, this motion is not binding, and the government will still have to formally add the Proud Boys to the list of terror groups. Doing so was something that was already being considered. Yeah. And let's see. Oh, Bill Blair, who's the public safety minister, and that in no way sounds sinister and or well. I'll just remind everyone again that Bill Blair was the police chief of Toronto at the G7, G20 meetings, where he turned Toronto into an armed camp and where the police stood around and watched as anarchists ran wild and then proceeded to make life misery for many, many Torontonians who were simply going about their business or trying to walk home. Cost of this exercise, $2 billion. Bill Blair says, we're very mindful of ideologically motivated violent extremists, including groups like the Proud Boys. They are white supremacists, anti-Semitics, Islamophobic, misogynist groups. They're all hateful. They're all dangerous. Oh, is it a crime now to be a misogynist? They're all hateful. They're all dangerous, working very diligently to ensure that where the evidence is available, we have the intelligence that will deal appropriately with those organizations. Of course, it's based on the evidence. It's based on the intelligence, and it's based on the law. Blair said in early January. This story, of course, includes no evidence whatsoever that the Proud Boys are an extremist group, that they advocate violence. insurrection, whatever. But that's not necessary. The accusation is the proof. That's where we are in Canada today. I mentioned previously, Senator Lynn Bayek, I don't know how her name is pronounced, who got into an enormous amount of trouble. What does this go back a couple of years ago, where she suggested that residential schools for Native Indians, which stopped existing some time ago, were not all that bad, that there were, pros and cons. And it was determined that she was the worst person in Canada, and she was suspended from the Senate by exercising her free speech as a senator. Now, it's the rule in my country that people cannot be prosecuted for libel, defamation, more precisely, for things that are said in their respective chambers. I guess, of course, when people are talking about residential schools. So she is now resigning 2 years before her term runs out. She was compelled to attend a re-education session. Yeah, she was. Re-education. Where a bunch of Indian activists, told her what a horrible person she was and the horrors of residential schools. And there was nothing good about them at all. Nothing, not one little bit. And so she was readmitted back to the Senate, whereupon I believe it was determined that she hadn't taken her re-education session seriously enough. So she was forced to go through another re-education session. Oh, by the way, we know that, Ted Wheeler certainly believes that hate speech is not free speech. Wait for it. It's coming soon. Misinformation is not free speech. And do we have anything else in Canuck Corner here? Oh, yes, some gloating from Susan Delacourt of the Toronto Star. It appears to be a sweeps week in Canadian politics when troublesome political players get swept right out of the action. Lynn Beck, Derek Sloan. One is tempted to give Donald Trump credit for kicking off this cleansing trend that spread north of the U.S. border. Just as Americans are getting ready to shake off the hangover of the Trump years, Canadian politics seems to be going through its own detoxifying exercise as 2020 begins. Yes. And if there are any Canadians listening to this, and I suspect that there are, my advice to you is to decide that you are not going to vote for Doug Ford or for the Conservative Party of Canada in a federal election. You're certainly not going to campaign for them or send them money. And you're going to talk about this to your friends and family. Because with this latest surrender on drugs, oh, by the way, the number of people killed by illegal drug overdoses in Canada versus the number of people who died of COVID-19 last year, it's not even close. Drugs win. No. Anyone who supports the so-called conservative parties of Canada is engaged in a campaign against their own survival. Oh, but apparently some conservative MPs have not learned that it is their job to keep silent. Later on Monday, one of O'Toole's Conservatives, Carrie Mulligan, was standing up at the Commons to call Trudeau wimpy. Oh, God, that's unthinkable. And Calgary MP Michelle Rempel-Garner was being chided for shouting, "What the hell," in the direction of the government. So this is clearly a work in progress. Yeah. Of course, I read recently that we're going to have a mixed schedule for the House of Commons. And no, they don't have to come to work all the time. If they don't need to come to, why do they need to come to work ever? Why do we even need to have votes? Let's just, have polls. We'll just have polls instead. Let's see. Susan Delacourt ends. Trump may well be proud of the ex-senator's ability to see the good people on both sides of the racist divide, as he did with the very fine people he said were involved in the deadly riots incited by the far right in Virginia in 2017. This statement has been debunked again and again and again, but Susan Delacourt is going to continue to lie again and again and again because people like her ilk, are never going to be held to account for their lies. They're obvious lies because what Trump said, it's on video. It's not really mysterious what he said. Anyway, let's see. Let's have a look at the chat before I move into political science. Hopper says it's advisable to wait for official prompting before reacting to events. Shogaken 666, just checking, has Biden sent out those stimulus checks yet? I do not believe so. Head McNexus, people in Europe and Asia asked me constantly why I prominently displayed an American flag on my backpack. I said it was so I wouldn't be mistaken for a Canadian. This is a particular Canadian joke. Well, it is a joke to me that the story goes, and this story goes back, what, 20, 30 years, that Americans traveling in Europe, the type who would stay at hostels, would put a Canadian flag on their backpack and not an American flag because they were afraid of ill treatment if they were discovered to be American, which of course raises the obvious question of why you would put a flag on your backpack at all. There's no necessity to do so. As soon as you open your mouth in Europe, people are going to figure out that you are from North America. And this led to, apparently Canadians are just loved in Europe. Whenever Europeans find out that someone is a Canadian, they just stop. They always stop and they say about how much they love Canadians. And apparently they will burble on about World War II, which ended 76 years ago, as if people talk about that sort of stuff. Apparently just in the Netherlands, they just, I don't think that Canadians need to pay for a meal or a drink in the Netherlands because they just love us so very much there. KMG, is there a movie that you hated when you first saw it, but now like love? Actually, the first Coen Brothers movie, Blood Simple, I didn't like it very much when I first saw it. I like it a lot more now. Perhaps it's that big fellow with the big head. He's always very sweary in all of his movies. He's the one who plays the corrupt cop in it. I don't react very well to him. Hang on, I'll just find his name here. His name is M. Emmett Walsh. What he has played a creep, a big creep, a really ugly, unbearable creep in every movie that he's ever been in. So perhaps that was part of it. I suppose technically the movie is, the Coen Brothers films have been renowned for their technical accomplishment. That one, not so technically accomplished, even though it was DP'd by Barry Sonnenfeld. But I'm sure there are other examples. Roulette Crack says, I'm English and spent a year in Louisiana. They kept asking me if I was Australian. Ooh, Mr. Cotter, I'm never voting PC or CPC again. Jogakin 666, Kevin Review Quadrophenia. I don't think I've ever seen that film. I wasn't all that fond of the album. It just, the concept was, I don't know, Tommy was a pretty crummy concept too, but there's some good songs on that. The Real Me, I guess. Blood Simple has an annoyingly repetitive score, says Head McNeck. Okay. It was on a small cruise ship, only 3 flights of stairs. All of these morbidly obese people kept asking where the elevators were. There were no elevators. It must have been a very small cruise ship. I find that really hard to imagine, actually. He wasn't really a creep and ordinary people, just a hard-ass coach. Ordinary people. directed by Robert Redford. Didn't he win an Oscar for Best Director the next year's Oscars? I hate that movie with a passion. Oh, you know, we figured out it's all Mom's fault. Of course, it's all Mom's fault. Well, I guess we can just put this all behind us because it was all Mom's fault. If only life were that simple. I hate Tommy the movie, says Paul Picasso 88. Given what we know about Pete Townsend, it's kind of hard not to see it as endorsing pedophilia now. Okay. Kevin is correct. It happens everywhere. Yes, this is about the flag thing, I guess. Roulette Crack says, weird how elected officials are now being targeted, kind of repudiation of the whole democratic system by those desperate to hold onto power. The Proud Boys' mottos is our strength is our diversity. Yeah, they seem to be very much believe in what? Citizenship. How brazen of jug meat to label others terrorists is my trail of disgrace. Okay, I'm going to be talking about Machiavelli for a little while now, and but that's not the end of the show. There's more to come. This is Machiavelli's conception of history. This is, of course, The Machiavellians, Defender of Freedom by James Burnham, the book that explains how the world really works. He begins, Machiavelli does not have a systematically worked out theory of history. The many generalizations which he states are for the most part limited, dealing with some special phase of political action, and a list of them would be a summary of most of his writings. There are, however, in addition to those that I've already analyzed, a few wider principles of great influence in the later development of Machiavellianism. One, a political life, according to Machiavelli, is never static, but in continual change. There is no way of avoiding this change. Any idea of a perfect state, or even of a reasonably good state, much short of perfection that could last indefinitely, is an illusion. Well, you know, you see this in 2016, that all the experts said that Donald Trump could not be elected president of the United States because he was not presidential. I guess they'd forgotten about Bill Clinton. Peregrine Worsthorne, the great British political writer who died last year, he was a reporter in Washington at the time of Nixon's famous Checkers speech. And so he confidently cabled back a story saying that Nixon was through, that even Americans wouldn't swallow so much half-baked corn. Well, it turns out that Peregrine Worsthorne was absolutely wrong about that. So the Checkers speech was a triumph for Nixon, that he cast himself with his wife's Pat's, you know, good old Republican cloth coat and a little spaniel dog called Checkers, which he was not giving back. He managed to turn himself into the underdog, into a man of the people. And Worsthorne had to admit that he did not understand Americans as well as he thought that he had. Bill Clinton, this greasy, grimy figure, just so desperate to be loved, so vulgar. And when he and his grasping, horrifying Lady Macbeth showed up on 60 Minutes, which is this agonizing appraisal of what unfaithfulness, or I don't know if that word was even used, in their marriage, I thought, that's it. He's finished. This was painful to watch and disgraceful. Nope. Turned out I didn't understand Americans as well as I thought that I had, or that what had been acceptable for a presidential candidate had changed. That cultures change over time. And Bill Clinton, I don't know, perhaps a decade earlier or 12 years earlier would have been considered, you know, too vulgar, too sweaty, too obviously phony to be a presidential candidate. But by 1992, he hit the spot. So back to Burnham. The process of change is repetitive and roughly cyclical. That is to say, the pattern of change occurs again and again in history. So by studying the past, we learn also about the present and future. And this pattern comprises a more or less recognizable cycle. A good, flourishing, prosperous state becomes corrupt, evil, degenerate. From the corrupt, evil state again arises one that is strong and flourishing. The degeneration can perhaps be delayed, but Machiavelli has no confidence that it could be avoided. The very virtues of the good state contain the seeds of its own destruction. The strong and flourishing state is feared by all neighbors and is therefore left in peace. War and the ways of force are neglected. The peace and prosperity breed idleness, luxury, and license. These political corruption, tyranny, and weakness. The state is overcome by the force of uncorrupted neighbors, or itself enters a new cycle, where hard days and arms purge the corruption and bring a new strength, a new virtue, and prosperity. But once again, the degeneration sets in. This is rather similar to what Anthony Burgess posited in his novel, The Wanting Seed from 1961, of a shift from an Augustinian point of view to a Pelagian point of view. The Gus phase and the Pell phase with the interphase between, and we are currently in a Pelagian phase now. That is to say, we don't believe in original sin. But everything is falling apart, and I think that we are in or close to the interphase. Machiavelli writes, governments in the variations which most commonly happen to them do proceed from order to confusion, and that confusion afterwards turns to order again. For nature, having fixed no sublunary things, as soon as they arrive at their acme and perfection, being capable of no further ascent of necessity, they decline. This is an anti-liberal position. John Gray wrote in 7 Types of Atheism that liberalism is essentially a corrupted form of Christianity. That the liberal view is, or was, that we were heading towards perfection. And this was ineluctable. It could not be stopped. I don't know whether people believe that anymore. Number 2, the recurring pattern of change expresses the more or less permanent core of human nature as it functions politically. The instability of all governments and political forms follows in part from the limitless human appetite for power. Machiavelli wrote in the Discourses, it is observed by most ancient writers that as men are afflicted in adversity, so they are satiated in prosperity, and that joy and grief have the same effects. For when men are not necessitated to fight, they fight for ambition, which is so powerful in our minds that let us arrive at what height of good fortune we can. We are never contented, but are still laboring for more. And this happens to us because we are naturally capable of desiring many things, which we are unable to compass, and therefore our desire being greater than our power to acquire, our minds are never at rest with what we enjoy. And this is the occasion of all our varieties of fortune. Number 3, Machiavelli assigns a major function in political affairs to what he calls fortune. Sometimes he seems almost to personify fortune, and in the manner that lingered on through the Middle Ages from ancient times, to write about her as a goddess. He discusses fortune not merely in occasional references, but in a number of lengthy passages scattered throughout his works. From these passages, it becomes clear what Machiavelli means by fortune. Fortune is all those causes of historical change that are beyond the deliberate, rational control of men. In the case both of individuals and of states, Machiavelli believes that those causes are many, often primary, and in the long run, probably dominant. He does not altogether exclude from history the influence of deliberate human control, but he reduces it to a strictly limited range. Similarly, for many years now, observing many elections, I've come to the conclusion that the winners in political contests, it's not so much how good you are, it is how bad the other guy or gal is. Stephen Harper was particularly lucky in his choice of opponents. Paul Martin, Stefan Dion, Michael Ignatieff, each one worse than the last. And that is a very lucky string, and one might say that Stephen Harper was blessed by fortune. Burnham comments, this conception of fortune fits in closely with the idea, which we have already noted, that the ruler type of political man is one who knows how to accommodate to the times. Fortune cannot be overcome, but advantage may be taken of her. Beyond such accommodation, opportunism, we might nowadays call it, men and states will make most of fortune when they display virtue, when they are firm, bold, quick in decision, not irresolute, cowardly, and timid. 4. Machiavelli believes that religion is essential to the well-being of a state. In discussing religion, as in discussing human nature, Machiavelli confines himself to political function. He is not engaged in theological dispute, nor inquiring whether religion or some particular religion is true or false, but trying to estimate the role that religious belief and ritual perform in politics. He is analyzing, we might say, in a general sense, myth. And myth he finds to be politically indispensable, as did George Sorel, of whom we will hear much more later. Though Rome should have been founded by Romulus and owe him as his daughter for her birth and education, yet the heavens foreseeing that the constitutions of Romulus would not be sufficient for so great an empire, put it into the heart of the Roman Senate to create a Numa Pompilius for his successor, to the end that what was left defective by the first might be completed by the latter. Numa, finding the people martial and fierce, and being desirous by the arts of peace to reduce them to civil obedience, he betook himself to religion as a thing absolutely necessary to the maintenance of civil policy, and he ordered things so that for many ages together never was the fear of God so eminently conspicuous as in that commonwealth, which was a great promotion to whatever was designed either by the Senate or princes. You see how both Justin Trudeau and Joe Biden are so keen to let us know that they are religious men, specifically Roman Catholics. They are not, of course, in Biden's case. A Roman Catholic would not support abortion, would not cheer on abortion or homosexual marriage, or decide that he was in favor of the persecution of religious order of nuns, or perhaps most specifically and most scandalously, when he was vice president, married 2 men when he was in his White House quarters. But no, I suppose for the time being, it still looks good to pretend to be religious. 5, we've already seen that Machiavelli's chief immediate practical goal was the national unification of Italy. In the review of his descriptive conclusions about the nature of political activity, no reference has been made to any more general goals or ideals to which Machiavelli adhered. I return now to this problem of goal in order to answer the question, what kind of government did Machiavelli think best? His writings, taken in their entirety, leave no doubt about the answer. Machiavelli thinks the best kind of government is a republic, or what he called a commonwealth. Not only does he prefer a republican government, other things being equal, he considers a republic stronger, more enduring, wiser, and more flexible than any form of monarchy. This opinion is above all clarified by Machiavelli's most important work, the Discourses on Livy, but is at least implicit in everything that he wrote. His preference for a republic does not contradict his conclusion that the leadership of a prince was required for the national unification of Italy. If a republic is the best form of government, it does not follow that a republic is possible at every moment and for all things. Machiavelli's preferences are always disciplined by the truth. The truth here, as he correctly saw, was that Italy could not then be unified except, in the initial stages at least, through a prince. But in preferring a republican form of government, Machiavelli paints no utopia. He states the defects of his ideals as honestly as their virtues. It is true, moreover, that he does not attach quite the ultimate importance to the choice of form of government that would be attributed to that choice by utopians who believe that all human problems can be solved if only their own private ideal can be realized. There is no way, Machiavelli believes, to solve all or even most human problems. That was the default view of history. Pretty much the vast majority of all men throughout all recorded time. Now it's considered a very wicked view because it's just simply a question of willpower for us to eliminate racism, whatever that might be, white supremacy, whatever that might be, misogyny, whatever that might be, and also COVID-19. Simply a question of willpower. But back to Burnham. Beyond and superior to his preference among the forms of government, Machiavelli projects his ideal of liberty. For any group of people, liberty, as Machiavelli used the word, means independence. That is, no external subjection to another group, and internally a government by law, not by the arbitrary will of any individual princes or commoners. Independence, the first condition of liberty, can be secured in the last analysis only by the armed strength of the citizenry itself, never by mercenaries or allies or money. Consequently, arms are the first foundation of liberty. There is no lasting safeguard for liberty in anything but one's own strength. When it comes to Canada, that's an interesting comment. Because throughout my life, I have never, not once, heard any discussion, in the newspapers, on the internet, in books, in academia, of a Canadian plan to resist invasion. Now, today, and since the end of the Cold War, the only possible military threat to Canada is the United States of America. But it seems that our military has devolved to a social experiment. How many women can we get in there? How many women in combat? How many women in leadership positions? How many homosexuals can we get in there? How many racial minorities can we get in there? How many trans people, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? The fact that our military has become an absolute joke is secondary to considerations of the Canada's ongoing social revolution. As protectors of liberty, Machiavelli has no confidence in individual men as such, driven by unlimited ambition, deceiving even themselves. They are always corrupted by power, but individuals can, to some extent at least and for a while, be disciplined within the established framework of wise laws. A great deal of the discourse is a commentary on this problem. In chapter after chapter, Machiavelli insists that if liberty is to be preserved, no person and no magistrate may be permitted to be above the law. Ho, ho, ho. Well, as we have discovered, first in the United States and then in Canada, and now even in Britain, our magistrates are indeed above the law. And we all clap for this because constitutions, written or otherwise, are they're living documents. Determined by whom? Well, determined by people who went to law school, where they were all taught the same things. Machiavelli is not so naive as to imagine that the law can support itself. The law is founded upon force, but the force in turn will destroy the law unless it is also bridled. Force can be bridled only by opposing force. Sociologically, therefore, the foundation of liberty is a balancing of forces, what Machiavelli calls a mixed government. Since Machiavelli is neither a propagandist nor an apologist, since he is not the demagogue of any party or sect or group, he knows and says how hypocritical are the calls for a unity that is a mask for the suppression of all opposition. How fatally lying or wrong are all beliefs that liberty is the peculiar attribute of any single individual or group, prince or democrat, nobles or people or multitude. Only out of the continuing clash of opposing groups can liberty flow. And this leads to Machiavelli's belief in the necessity of having alternative elites. It has been the goal of our elites to eliminate any possible alternatives. And the fracas on Capitol Hill on January 6th has given them, in the United States, the elite, the excuse to eliminate all dissenting voices, and strangely enough, in Canada as well. Machiavelli writes in the History of Florence, all cities do sometime or other alter their government, yet not, as many think, by means of liberty and subjection, but by occasion of servitude and licentiousness. For only the name of liberty is pretended by popular persons, such as are the instruments of licentiousness, and servitude is sought by those that are noble, neither of them both desiring to be strained either by laws or anything else. Liberty, then, Burnham comments, not the rhetorical liberty of an impossible and misconceived utopia, but such concrete liberty as is, when they are fortunate within the grasp of real men, with their real limitations, is the dominant ideal of Machiavelli and his final norm of judgment. Tyranny is liberty's opposite, and no man has been a clearer foe of tyranny. No man clearer and few more eloquent. In the 14th century, the Florentine people, threatened by external danger and by eternal dissension, decided to turn their government over to a foreigner, the Duke of Athens. Machiavelli, in his History of Florence, narrating the events just before the Duke took over full power, puts this address in the mouth of one of the signori to whom were entrusted the ancient liberties of the Republic. My lord, your endeavor is to bring this city into servitude, which has always lived free. Have you considered how important a dead the name of liberty is to us? A thing no force can extirpate, no time can extinguish, nor no merit preponderate. Yes, yes. And we will move on tomorrow to a discussion of Machiavelli's reputation. And let's have a look at the chat. Okay, I have the Audible audiobook. It's not so great. It says my trail of disgrace. That would presumably be the Machiavellians. There's an unofficial reprint on the Machiavellians available. Yes, that is, I believe you go to Amazon.com. You should be able to get it. The world is busily engaged in turning lead into gold, a fool's errand. Yes, that was one of the great, how would you say, well, it wasn't a contagion of the popular people. It was a contagion of priestly class, or certain numbers of the priestly class that, you know, if they had the gnosis, the light, this would give them the power to turn lead into gold. And so much of our politics today, the greater part of it, is an attempt to turn lead into gold, which leads to, not to mix metaphors here, what John Derbyshire has described as the magic dirt myth. That when foreigners from wherever they come in the world, no matter their, you know, their age or their intelligence or their educational attainment, are transformed by America's magic dirt. We hear a similar thing in Canada because, of course, as I've mentioned earlier, every stupid idea that originates in the United States is quickly taken up by Canada's intellectuals and power brokers. Elizabeth McGovern, Palcasso 88, she was a lovely young woman. Palcasso 88, playing the sax on Arsenio. I was 16 then, and I couldn't believe it. Yes, later he went on MTV, where he dealt with the profound question of whether he wore boxers or briefs. I don't know. It just, I was rewatching episodes of Armando Iannucci's excellent HBO series Veep, and watching Julia Louis-Dreyfus play Selina Meyer, and just this completely insincere, mindless chatter with people on the campaign trail, and her pretense that she has remembered every person that she has ever met and knows the names and some fact about every person that she has never met. It's just, it's decadence. It's simply decadence. I've known politicians who, you know, they've trained themselves to remember every person they've ever met, and that it has struck me that there's only so much room in the brain. And if you're going to remember everyone that you've ever met and a fact about them, Mike Harcourt, the former mayor of Vancouver and premier of British Columbia, he was par excellence at this. It strikes me there's only so much in the room in the brain, so if you're going to fill it up with all this, that leaves less room for more important things. Okay. Newton believed in alchemy, a connection. He believed in all sorts of strange things. Hedman Next, as a news reporter, asked the boxers or briefs questions to 3 candidates for Tulsa mayor a few years ago. Pure cringe. I would say, honestly, I'm not answering that question. First of all, it's none of your business. And second, it is a stupid question. You call yourself a newsman? Don't you have more important things on your mind? Of course, we have Kamala Harris. Can't wait for her to be president. That her Chuck Taylors, they define her, and they define all the people who wear them. This is the sort of comment that makes one wonder whether one actually heard it or is not a delusion. Furthermore, of course, she expected to be applauded for this. Yes. So, Pope Francis, or Anti-Pope Francis, as I prefer to call him, has been rather ill of late. He suffers from sciatica, which I understand is a very painful ailment, and he's had to cancel quite a number of engagements in the last couple of months. He is 84 years old. There is a rather strange story. It's a political story, actually, by Clive Hammond in the London Daily Express. Pope Benedict sparks fears for future of church as concerns over Francis's health emerge. Pope Benedict. Yeah, this is a very strange situation. It was 7 years ago that he resigned as Pope. And a lot of people thought at the time, well, I guess he's resigning as Pope because he's gaga, and he's not going to be around for much longer. Well, it's 7 years later, and during those 7 years, he has given a number of addresses or published things which indicate that he is not gaga at all. It seems there was something of a coup to oust him, which is really unprecedented. But here we are. Pope Benedict will spark concerns about the survival of the Catholic Church itself, a worried expert has claimed, as fears grow about Pope Francis's health. This is a story by Clive Hammond. Let's see. Vatican author Linda Telford. She said she was fearful for the future of the Church if Francis stood down. She told the Express that the Vatican will struggle to maintain order if someone similar to Francis's predecessor, Benedict, took over. See, this is a very incompetent headline here because it suggests that Benedict is going to become Pope again if Francis dies. Telford argues that Benedict's traditionalist views put off those with a more modern mindset who could be tempted to join the Catholic Church. I don't know that it's fair to describe Pope Benedict as a traditionalist. I suppose you could say that he was a conservative. Never forget that Benedict, when he was Joseph Ratzinger, was a peritus or expert at the Second Vatican Council, part of the notorious German group which hijacked the proceedings. Oh, the church needs to be opened up. It needs to be modernized. I think that Benedict is a good and holy man. However, this hermeneutic of continuity, that is to say, everything is different, but it's really the same. It's a non-starter. It's a non-starter in the same way that the Oxford movement in 19th century England was, specifically that, oh, yes, Henry VIII and the Church of England, but it's really still the Catholic Church. That was a non-starter as well. And all of the leading lights of the Oxford movement, including John Henry Newman and Father Faber, et cetera, they all realized that they were wrong about that. It was just wishful thinking. Francis has been widely praised for installing a liberal agenda within the Vatican. Widely praised by whom? Those people who hate the Roman Catholic Church. Of course, the media, the elite. Yes, let's just say, these people tempted to join the Catholic Church. Well, Francis has been Pope for 7 years. Is there a huge increase of conversions because of his modernism? I am not aware of it. The new regime was epitomized by Francis' decision to give women greater powers within the church this month. Yet should a Benedict type enter the Vatican next, the work carried out by Francis could be ruined, Telford suggests. She said Benedict and supporters would be terrified by some of Francis's choices, while Pope adding, quote, they really would not like the idea at all of women in the church, but Francis is aware that things have to change, otherwise the church will go under, unquote. The church will go under. That is a very amusing thing to say at a time when Catholic churches around the world are literally empty because they have closed the doors to the churches because they were afraid of a virus. They are not afraid of our Lord, but they are afraid of a virus. Benedict was described by Telford, author of Women in the Vatican, Female Power in a Male World, as an opponent of change. And since he stood down in 2013, he had been creating difficulties for Francis. How so? How so? She said he is a very strong traditionalist. No, he is not. And in the Vatican, there are far too many of them, these backward-looking traditionalists, boo, who don't want any kind of change. If Benedict had really been a traditionalist, he would have got rid of the New Order, Mass instituted in 1970, which has been a complete disaster for the Catholic Church. Telford continued, I think, of course, it is all leading to the fact that if you free women of contraception with a marriage to a priest even, you're leading inevitably to the female priesthood, or at least a part female priesthood, which is a terrifying thought for most people who are in the higher echelons of the church right now. I'm sorry, women cannot be priests. Full stop. Other churches have them. They are not the Catholic Church. And frankly, what the Episcopalians decide to do is of no interest to me, and it is of interest to very few people in the world, because that church is disappearing before our eyes. Of course, if the Franciscans have their way, the Neo-Franciscans, the Catholic Church will disappear, and rather rapidly as well. What Francis is offering is exactly what the elite is offering. It's pretty much, where's the difference between the World Economic Forum and Pope Francis? I see very little difference at all. Telford added, at a time when I think the church needs to change, the church has been changing unceasingly since roughly since 1958, but it's never enough. It is never enough. And the liberals, the modernists have said, oh, yes, if we do this, it'll make us more popular, more popular, more popular. Well, no, right from the very beginning, it's made the church much less popular. And so now we are seeing adoption of Karl Rahner's view of the little flock. You see, it's a good thing that all these Catholics are leaving, because there was just too many of them, and they weren't committed enough. They weren't paying enough attention, presumably, to gossip from the Vatican or poring over papal encyclicals. Very few people, Catholics, were poring over papal encyclicals until recent decades. She concludes, I'm sure Pope Francis is aware of this, and he's also extremely popular with the people. Sure he is. Sure he is. He cannot stop snapping at people that he meets or smacking away their hands. I guess that's another example of his common touch. Oh, last year, Benedict made the highly controversial move to defend priestly celibacy within the church. Oh, yeah, it's just a tradition that's 2,000 years old. So defend it would be highly controversial. In a piece co-authored with Cardinal Robert Serra, the 93-year-old said he could not remain silent on the issue, arguing the tradition has great significance as it ensures the priests focus on their religious duties. It sparked outrage among experts on Catholicism, including Joshua McElwee. Yeah, noted Catholic expert Joshua McElwee, a journalist for the National Catholic Reporter, describing the moment as incredible. A former pope speaking in public about something his successor is currently in the process of considering. His thoughts were shared by Martin Bashir. Oh, wow, they are really digging at the bottom of the barrel here. The BBC's religion editor. Curiously enough, this piece does not include any people who disagree with feminist Telfer. Oh, yes, Pope Francis, so very loved. When John Paul II, and I'm not going to call him a saint because he isn't and can't be, when he died, the elite, the media was just burbling, just how beloved he was. Even more than Paul VI, John Paul II presided over the gutting of the Catholic Church, which I suppose is the reason why the media sang his praises. In more Neo-Catholicism views, This is from America, the Jesuit Review, which is one of the most heretical Catholic papers in the world. Oh, and a group of U.S. Catholic bishops, including a cardinal and an archbishop, signed a statement of support for alphabet people youth, telling them God created you, God loves you, and God is on your side. And there's a picture here of altar server Angelo Alcasabas preparing the altar during the annual pre-Pride festive mass at St. Francis of Assisi Church in New York City, June 28, 2019. He's wearing a black t-shirt that has a rainbow square on it that says love. Yes, he's definitely showing a great deal of respect for the Mass, isn't he? As we see in the Gospels, Jesus Christ taught love, mercy, and welcome for all people, especially for those who felt persecuted or marginalized in any way, and the Catechism of the Catholic Church teaches that alphabet people are to be treated with respect, compassion, and sensitivity. It also says that they are psychologically disordered, which is another example of the degeneracy of the church, because it's not, a psychological issue. It is a moral issue. Among those signing the statement were Cardinal Joseph Tobin, Archbishop of Newark, and Archbishop John Wester, who heads the Archdiocese of Santa Fe. All people of goodwill should help support and defend alphabet youth who attempt suicide at much higher rates than their straight counterparts. There's no possible understanding here that perhaps it is a sickness unto death that leads these people to suicide attempts. Yes, apparently the alphabet people are the eternal underdogs. They haven't been the eternal underdogs in the American Catholic Church for decades. They have been the overdogs. The gay mafia has run the American Catholic Church. And what has been the result of that? Well, we've had tens of thousands of youths who've been sexually molested by priests and by bishops. We have had settlements of many billions of dollars, and we have had the almost complete destruction of the reputation of the Roman Catholic Church in America. Well done, gay Catholics. But of course, they need more power. They're determined to create a church which is suitable only for homosexuals, communists, and traitors. That's the church they are intent on building. Let's talk about Hollywood and intersectionality, which, as you know, is my favorite subject. This is from a site called Pirates and Princesses. Lucasfilm's uneven handling of racism leads to more calls to fire Gina Carrano from The Mandalorian. Another day, another PR nightmare for Disney-owned Lucasfilm. Racism is front and center again months after John Boyega attacked the company for sidelining Finn in the Star Wars sequel trilogy, and days after Darth Vader voice actor James Earl Jones was seemingly snubbed by the official Star Wars Twitter account on his 90th birthday. Christina Ariel was recently announced as the host of the High Republic show on the official Star Wars YouTube channel. Ariel, an actress who built up her social media following on the popular tabletop gaming series Critical Role, enthusiastically accepted the gig. But soon after her announcement, conservative-leaning pop culture news site Bounding into Comments unearthed some angry tweets about white people. Boo! That many people found a little troubling. I should mention that Christina Ariel is a black woman. Just because she attacks white people doesn't mean that she's black. I just thought I'd make this clear. Here is a tweet from March 23rd of last year from Christina Ariel. White people, fucking stop it. Your racism won't save you. Your ignorance is not an excuse. From June the 22nd. Just a reminder that white women are just as complicit in the upholding and enforcing white supremacy. This is from June the 7th, because white people can't let us have shit unless they can center themselves as the hero. Yeah, much more like this. People rush to her defense. Matthew Mercer, Who is this person? Oh, voiceover guy and dungeon okay, that's dungeon master. Okay. There are few as bright, badass, and altogether wonderful as Christina Ariel, and anyone who tries to step into her ring better know we're right there beside her. Oh, don't make the mistake. Don't mistake the power of a pissed off bard who went through the exact same shit last week. Hashtag trending. I stand with Christina because everyone hates white people now. And of course, as David Pinson suggested, John Boyega should play all the parts in all the Star Wars movies. I don't really see that there's any excuse for any white people at all in movies anymore. Because if you look at the history of movies, if you look at the, over 30,000 movies that have been put out by Hollywood, that the percentage of black performers in them would be like, 1-2%? I think we need to go like another 100 movies or so where it's just black people. Now, that might cause difficulties for the bottom line of the studios, especially Disney, but can you really put a price on justice? I say no. So just some guy tweeted, the more you hire and support people who spout racist drivel like Christina Ariel, the more Star Wars fans will slip through your fingers. But you don't want their money because white people are supremacist and racist until proved innocent. And we don't have the time to go around proving them innocent, which would probably just give them, more swelled heads than they have already. Best to just throw away their money. You don't want it. Star Wars weighed in on the 22nd of this month. Officially, our Star Wars community is one of hope and inclusivity. We do not stand for bullying and racism. We support Christina Ariel. It's good to know you support the woman who hates white people with a passion. Gina Carrano. It turns out that Gina is not a left-winger. She plays Cara Dune in The Mandalorian, and she's an outspoken conservative who has come under fire for what seemed to believe to be controversial views, as well as her unwillingness to kowtow to Twitter outrage mobs. There's been a rumor that behind the scenes at Lucasfilm, Gina Carrano is at the center of a civil war between the Kathleen Kennedy Lucasfilm Story Group, High Republic camp, and the Favreau, that would be Jon Favreau, Filoni Mandalorian camp. Twitter, being predominantly used by people identifying as left-wing or far left, don't like Carrano or her views, and many users are looking for reasons to get her canceled from the show. Despite the fact that in real life, Carrano and co-star Pedro Pascal, who seems pretty far left himself, do seem to get along fine. So, if I understand this correctly, that because it turns out that this Ariel woman is a white hater, that a Hispanic woman called Gina Carrano, I don't know whether she's Hispanic, maybe she's Italian, she needs to be fired. That'll solve the problem. From CBS News executives placed on leave after reports of racist and sexist comments. The men, Peter Dunn and David Friend, they would appear to be, they're white men, I would say, in their 50s, or one of them perhaps in his early 60s. Two CBS local television executives were placed on administrative leave Monday, hours after the National Association of Black Journalists demanded they be fired over a Los Angeles Times investigation into allegations they cultivated a hostile work environment. Okay. I think there's an easy solution to this. I think that everyone on news, both network and local, should be non-white. Both the people in front of the camera, the people behind the camera, the people who write it, produce it, direct it, and the executives. If one looks at the history of television news in the United States, one finds that until fairly recently, there were very few non-white people on it, and it's time to redress the balance. Again, this might impact the bottom line of these news organizations, but can one put a price on justice? And once again, I declare no. I was speaking last week about a genius young woman, a woman obviously with the whole world in front of her, Amanda Gorman, who wrote the stupendous Stupor Mundi poem that was recited at Joe Biden's inaugural. And I might have given the impression that this woman was using her shitty poetry as an excuse to get rich. But I just, I apologize if I gave people that impression. Here's a story from the Daily Mail. Youngest ever inaugural poet, Amanda Gorman, looks set to make the most of her moment in the spotlight after signing with elite modeling agency IMG, which also represents the likes of Gigi and Bella Hadid, Karlie Kloss, Ashley Graham, and Giselle. The 22-year-old became an overnight sensation after performing her original piece, The Hill We Climb, at Biden's inauguration January 20th, and has now inked a deal with the New York-based agency, which will help her sign lucrative brand partnerships and endorsements moving forward. There's a suggestion that this woman is going to become a catwalk model. I don't think that's going to happen. But of course, there is a woman, what's her name? Harlow, who is disfigured with a terrible disease. She is a Black woman, and she has these ugly, huge white blotches all over her face, all over her body. And she's a catwalk model, so I guess anyone can be a catwalk model now. Oh, Carrie Mulligan is an actress who I have seen. And I thought she did a good job playing a nasty woman in Inside Llewyn Davis. And she was in the movie An Education, which I thought was good. She is now instructing us that looks have nothing to do with being an actress. Why would anyone think that? If you look at Hitchcock's film Rear Window, why wasn't Thelma Ritter playing the Grace Kelly part and vice versa? Because looks have absolutely nothing to do with, which actor or actress should be chosen for any role. Carrie Mulligan has explained why she chose to speak out against a film review that suggested she wasn't hot enough to play the lead character in Promising Young Woman. In the review, written by freelance film critic Dennis Harvey and first published by Variety in January last year, Mulligan is labeled as an odd choice to play the femme fatale character. Harvey also suggests that Margot Robbie, a producer on the project, should have taken on the role instead. I'm looking at a picture of Carrie Mulligan, and she's not a very attractive woman. I'll just say that. The critic even compares Mulligan's costumes in the movie to bad drag and writes even her long blonde hair seems a put-on. Given the film's underlying theme of sexual assault, Mulligan, 35, felt the review, which was mostly positive aside from the unnecessary commentary on her looks, was disappointingly tone-deaf. The British Star reflected on an interview last month telling the New York Times, I read the Variety review because I'm a weak person. It wasn't some sort of ego-wounding thing, like I can fully see that Margot Robbie is a goddess, and there's a picture of her from this movie, a still, which looks like a joke. This woman looks like she's 50 years old and deranged with her multicolored wig and her sexy nurse's outfit. She does not look alluring in any way whatsoever. She looks like a sexualized nurse ratchet. Oh, and so what is this movie about? It sees Cassie, played by Mulligan, go to nightclubs and act highly intoxicated, luring predatory men back to her apartment so she can teach them a lesson when they try to take advantage of her. It becomes clear as the film progresses that Mulligan's character is still haunted by the rape of one of her best school friends, and she makes it her mission to exact revenge on the perpetrators. What, the same men? How very convenient. After Mulligan's comments about the film review, Variety posted an apology at the top of the review, which read, Variety sincerely apologizes to Carrie Mulligan and regrets the insensitive language and insinuation of our review of Promising Young Woman that minimized her daring performance. Promising Young Woman. She very much does not look like a promising young woman in any of the stills that I have seen from this film. I feel it's important, Mulligan told Zendaya on Variety's Actors on Actors, that criticism is constructive. I'm not prone to quote William F. Buckley Jr., but he nailed this, about 60 years ago? Criticism is not constructive. By its very nature, criticism is destructive. But in any event, she continued, I think it's important that we're looking at the right things when it comes to work, and we're looking at the art. And we're looking at the performance and the way the film is made. And I don't think that goes to the appearance of an actor or your personal preference for what an actor does or doesn't look like, which it felt like that article did, which for me felt disappointing because obviously the film is sort of tackling issues around our perceptions and our preconceived ideas about people in the broadest sense. I think there's an element to where we have idealized women on screen for so long that I think we start to lose sight of what women really look like. When I worked with Steve McQueen on Shane, he said, really, what we're doing is holding up a mirror. That's what we do as storytellers. Then you must be a very crummy storyteller, because that's not what art is about. Art is about transfiguring reality. It's not holding up a mirror. Why do you think that John Wayne was such a popular movie star for so many decades? Could it have anything to do with how good looking he was? You know, Gregory Peck, William Holden, I could go on. I mentioned Jon Favreau, the director of The Mandalorian, which is the show which has apparently saved Star Wars. Jon Favreau was in a hit indie movie a while ago called Swingers, which also had Vince Vaughn in it. Jon Favreau is this kind of lumpy guy who's trying to become an actor in LA, and he's not succeeding, and he broke up with his girlfriend and he hasn't been able to get over it. Meanwhile, Vince Vaughn likes to score with chicks and likes to live the swingers lifestyle, and he's constantly trying to cheer up his friend Jon Favreau. You know, come on. There's lots of ladies, or babies as he calls them, around. You just have to learn the spiel, display a little confidence. And of course, the movie would have been just successful if Vince Vaughn and Jon Favreau had traded roles, right? And I'm looking at another still of Mulligan dressed up like a schoolgirl, drinking something through a straw. It's just, no. Is this the deal? It looks like one of those things where women read some article where you have to spice up your marriage and then they make themselves look foolish. Yeah. No, she does not look attractive or sexy in the slightest. But no, I guess we can't have that anymore. And again, perhaps it just should be ugly people, all ugly people in Hollywood movies now and in TV shows. Again, that may have an impact on the bottom line, but can you put a price on justice? And for the last time, I'm going to say no, you cannot. I'm going to skip over Lily Collins boasting about her eating disorder because this sort of story sickens me. But in our final showbiz story, Kate Mulgrew has had the COVID-19 vaccination. Yeah. Because I was wondering. I couldn't get to sleep the last few weeks because I was wondering, Kate Mulgrew, has she had the jab? The 65-year-old actress who played Captain Catherine Janeway on Star Trek Voyager has taken to Twitter to reveal she's received the vaccination and also to urge her followers to trust in science. She wrote on the microblogging platform, got my COVID-19 vaccine in the wee hours of Monday morning. Consider this an order from your captain. Continue to mask up and register to receive your vaccine ASAP. Because these people are our betters. They're our superiors. Certainly, they're well-placed to give us moral advice, and they're certainly well-placed to give us medical advice, because we know that people in Hollywood always do the right thing in terms of their lifestyle. their diets, staying away for things which could be harmful to you, drugs, excessive alcohol consumption, that sort of thing. The people in Hollywood, the women and men, are truly our exemplars in all things. So that gives me a segue into COVID-19. The World Health Organization warns pregnant women should not get Moderna's COVID-19 vaccine. It's not a vaccine because it hasn't been proven safe, but U.S. doctors say it is up to the patients. Well, I guess that since Moderna has been given a waiver and is not liable for any of the damage that its not vaccine causes, yeah, sure. Leave it up to the doctors. I've been saying on the show for months now, it was admitted from the beginning that these mRNA jabs pose a significant risk to any woman who is pregnant or any woman who might become pregnant, which is roughly all women between the ages of 12 and 50. And I've also predicted that the vaccine is going to lead to a considerable spike in abortions. This is from the U.S. Sun. What are the symptoms of new COVID strains? The 6 signs to watch for. Oh my God, we're all going to die. It's up to 70% more infectious, and it's now emerged in the U.S. Persistent cough, symptom number 1, loss of taste and smell, high temperature, tiredness, headache, rash. Okay. Most of those are symptoms of influenza as well, but that's not important. And oh yes, inside COVID quarantine hotels, no fresh air, CCTV, ready meals, and DIY room cleaning. I received a message from the management of the hotel where I'm staying today saying that as of February 1st, they will no longer be washing my towels and sheets. For almost a year now, there has been no maid service in Victoria hotels. When I needed new towels and sheets, I would bring the old ones down in a bag and they give me new ones. But now they're saying that because of COVID, they can no longer provide this service. This is what Kingsley Amos would say is due to the easier for them principle. Shops boarded up as Danish brace for 4th nights of coronavirus riots. Oh, inexcusable. Don't they trust in science? And, U.S. suffers sharpest rise in poverty rate in more than 50 years. Huh. That's a coincidence. I'm sure this has nothing to do with the COVID-19 panic, the COVID-19 hysteria, the gravest self-inflicted wound to the West since World War I. But we've just got to ride it out, people, for however long it takes. Let's go to Lockdown Skeptics, wrapping up the show from Connor Chaplin. Boris keeps schools in limbo. When is anything going to open up in Britain? Who knows? Maybe never. Ross Clark reports in The Spectator, the European Centre for Disease Prevention and Control has not found a conclusive link between schools and the winter resurgence. The Daily Mail has reported on a survey by the Office for National Statistics showing that amid much hand-wringing about the safety of teachers, they are far from the highest risk occupation. Okay. Oh, I like this picture. A schoolgirl in Keswick, Cumbria, has been spotted in the town square staging a reverse Greta Thunberg-style protest in front of a very handsome, very old church. She is holding up a sign that says, "I want to go to school." Does charging travelers for enforced hotel stays violate WHO rules? Yes, apparently we're going to get this quarantine in Canada as well. Antibody levels may show Swedish herd immunity. COVID riots in the Netherlands, and here is a police car overturned and on fire outside Eindhoven Central Station. Curious that the greatest violence that we've seen has been in Denmark And in the Netherlands, also today, many police dogs are attacking protesters and bite. It's a heartwarming story from News Blog Media. Water cannon versus curfew protester, 1-0. Again, very amusing. News Blog, very amusing indeed. And yeah, I don't know. Everything I've been getting from lockdown skeptics is that the lid may be slammed down on skepticism, that it may be soon be determined to be a form of hate speech. And of course, hate speech has no rights. Never mind that lockdowns don't work, as even the governor of California seems to have discovered. And never mind that the scientists disagree with one another. It's the government scientists that one must listen to. Any non-government scientist is by definition, well, barely a scientist at best. And if they dissent from the orthodoxy, well, they are heretics. You can say that's not how science is supposed to work, but, you know, liberalism is dead. As I keep telling you, people, we are living in a post-liberal era. And so things like empirical evidence are surplus to requirements. Let's see, Alex Berenson. So in this pro-vaccine interview on January 19th, a Baylor OBGYN professor says the CDC told him several thousand pregnant women have received the vaccine. The data point actually isn't comforting at all in context of the miscarriage reports. And right on schedule, the New York Times runs this: pay no attention to those miscarriages behind the curtain, ladies. Opinion piece: women, coronavirus vaccines won't make you infertile. And you know it's gotta be true because the New York Times is saying so. Let's see, a news story from, again, the New York Times. COVID-19 live updates. Biden administration nears deal with Pfizer and Moderna for 200 million more doses. Alex Berenson comments, fantastic. We can vaccinate every pregnant woman an extra 50 times. Who will want all these extra doses? 300 million people would be every American, including all kids over 6. Plus, the evidence against vaccinating people who have already recovered is growing, and other vaccines are coming. Yeah. Look, the regulators failed when they didn't make the companies each enroll 5,000 plus people over 75, including thousands over 80. Then we would have had the data we need. It would at least vaccinate people at high risk, confidently or not. But no one seems to care. Warp speed. Yeah. Don't blame me for this. Trump was carrying on about warp speed and boasting about it. And I said right from the very beginning, it was a dreadful idea. But I think it's rather too, Biden is going to be blamed for this because he, where's the vaccine? Where's the vaccine? It's not come fast enough. How come enough vaccines haven't been distributed? How come enough people haven't gotten jabs? He has shown no skepticism whatsoever about this. And if this turns ugly, he is going to get the majority of the blame. Pregnant women taking it, that is utter insanity, says Roulette Cracked. Opportunistic looting in Holland, perhaps. The riots don't seem all that diverse, says Octopus Knight. Maybe didn't see the right videos. I hope the patriots in Netherlands and Denmark don't turn pro-lockdown just because diversity is rioting right now. I haven't looked into this. Ogan's Iron says the Dutch and Danish riots put me in a conundrum. It looks like it's a lot of diversity doing the anti-lockdown riots. The thing is, looks like they're rioting for a good reason for once. Well, as we know, this has been well documented, that Black people in particular seem to have a skepticism of vaccines because of a belief that governments look to do them harm with medicine. And so we have heard from, Toronto, we have heard from the United States, we have heard from Britain, that a great many Black people, including those inside the medical establishment, nurses and the like, they do not want the vaccine. Okay. And final comments. Mulligan also played Daisy Buchanan in The Great Gatsby. Yeah. John Favreau's character in Swingers was so whiny and pathetic, says Palpcasso88. I thought so too. I thought, if I had a friend like Vince Vaughn, it's like, come on, buddy. Come on. Get over it. Like, I'm a chick magnet. And so, because of proximity, I would have thought that's, pretty nice of him to do this, given how boring I've been to be around for the longest time. To me, what's funniest in that movie, there's a scene when these guys are coming out of the Swingers guys are coming out of the parking lot, and one of them bumps into a bunch of like skinheads. And I don't think they're not neo-Nazi skinheads. They're, I don't know, left-wing skinheads or something. And, they start jawing at each other. And one of the Swingers guys, a hothead, he pulls out a pistol and aims it at them. And he's pointing the pistol at them sideways, ghetto style, right? And the rest of his crew, they're just, this is outrageous. Like, how, you want to shoot people over this? You want to get the cops involved? They're furious with him. And, he's been going through some problems or whatever. And then a little while later, they come back to this apartment, and there's the hothead who pulled the gun on them. And a whole bunch of these skinheads are there, and they're playing Wayne Gretzky video hockey. It's like, yeah, I went up to them and apologized and thought it'd be good. Let's come back and, we'll play some hockey on the video game. I thought that was very funny indeed. Skinheads against racial prejudice. Yes, sharp. I had forgotten that brief craze. Carrie Mulligan ruined Wall Street 2 for me. It would have been a fun movie otherwise, says Half Galician. Look, she's not a very attractive woman. That doesn't mean she can't have a career in Hollywood. No one would call Meryl Streep a beauty, and she's done all right. I always like the bit where Vaughn tries to make Gretzky bleed in the video game. And on that bombshell, I'm going to wrap it up for today. Just a reminder that on Theater Thursday this week, I'm going to be discussing A Canterbury Tale from the Archers from 1944. And on the book club, I am going to be discussing Jim Bouton's Ball 4. And the version that I read included Ball 5, Ball 6, and Ball 7. I will be back on the air tomorrow at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. If you like the show or any part of it, I would appreciate it if you would click on the like button and subscribe to my YouTube channel if you have not done so already. If you would like to make a donation to this live stream, please, please, please. I could really use it. My PayPal account is kevin_grace@hotmail.com. Once again, kevin_grace@hotmail.com. If you are in Canada, you can send a donation directly to me via Interac at kevingrace@shaw.ca. And I leave you with this: in these days of social isolation and civilizational collapse, I do dearly wish that you, my dear listeners and viewers, manage to form a genuine human connection in order to ease the burden. Good night.